I'm Sarah Brown, and this is The Mothers, real conversations with leaders, creators, and thinkers about who we are, what we want, and how we build meaningful lives alongside motherhood. Hello, and welcome back to The Mothers. I'm Sarah Brown. We talk a lot on this show about ambition, sacrifice, and what it takes to build a meaningful life. But one thing that comes up again and again, and maybe nowhere more honestly than in this conversation, is what happens when life hands you something you never would have chosen, and what you build from there. This week, I sat down with Nasha Fitter, entrepreneur, rare disease advocate, mother of three, and one of the most impressive builders I've had the privilege to interview. Nasha is the co-founder and CEO of the FoxG1 Research Foundation, a global organization she started shortly after her daughter Amara was diagnosed with FoxG1 syndrome, a rare neurodevelopmental condition. In just a few years, Nasha and her team have helped develop the first gene replacement therapy for FoxG1 and are now moving toward clinical trials. She's also the co-founder and chief business officer of Citizen Health, an AI-powered platform helping families with rare and complex diseases better access care, organize data, and accelerate treatment development. Before all of this, Nasha also founded an education technology company called Schooly, which was acquired by Great Schools, and later served as a director at Microsoft. She also serves on the board of the ACMG Foundation for Genetic and Genomic Medicine. She's busy and building. But this conversation isn't just about what Nasha has built, whether we're referring to her companies, community, or her family. It's about the how. We talk about the conditioning so many women carry, to apologize, to feel guilty, to measure love through self-sacrifice, and why Nasha believes none of that actually serves us or our children. We talk about help, real help, and the systems required to make a life work, why investing in more support than you think you need isn't indulgent, it's essential. We talk about resentment in partnerships, the kind so many of us feel but really don't like talking about, and what can happen when instead of suppressing it, we get curious about what it might be revealing. And underneath all of it is something I think you'll feel deeply in this conversation: the power of purpose. How some of our hardest experiences can become the clearest roadmap toward the work we're here to do. Nasha is building the very thing she wishes existed for her daughter, and in doing so, making life better for millions of families navigating rare disease. It's a remarkable conversation. She's a remarkable mother. I'm so grateful to her for her honesty, her clarity, and her work. And if this episode moves you, I'd encourage you to take a moment after listening to support it. You can download Citizen Health and explore Ari, the new AI assistant for parents of children with rare diseases. And you can follow the FoxG1 research journey or consider donating to support their work. All of those links are in the episode description. And as always, if you're enjoying The Mothers, please follow and subscribe wherever you listen, and come join us on Instagram at The Mothers Pod. Thank you so much for being here. And now, please enjoy my interview with Nasha Fitter. One of the reasons I love these conversations that we do is, there are women out there doing remarkable things professionally, and then they have children. And then, not always, but often it's like such an accelerant to figuring out what really matters in life. And I can only imagine that your experience through motherhood and your third child, who's a beautiful child, but also comes with a lot of challenges, accelerates that even further. So there's so much wisdom that I'm excited to learn from you, both I love starting with the early days of little Nasha, because I do think that backstory really informs a lot. And I'd imagine that on some level, maybe we don't think about her. You're so forward looking onto the future, pursue what others tell you is maybe not possible, but that you are making possible. I think it's also important for all of our sakes, to dock in on kind of where we came from and give ourselves credit.
Yeah.
All right. So with that said, what I've gathered is you're a Californian originally, which is lovely because you seem largely relaxed and very cool. I'm an East Coaster, which makes me uptight and jealous of people that find happiness.
We welcome you. We want you.
Yeah. Well, I did live in San Francisco for a little bit, and it was wonderful therapy for being from Boston. But yeah, could you take me back to early days, California, Nasha? I know you're in California now, but I heard elsewhere that you described yourself as immediately highly ambitious. I would love to kind of unpack that and understand where that maybe came from. Are you an oldest daughter by any chance? This is
I'm
my
an
new
only
favorite
child.
question.
I'm an
Oh,
only
wow. So you do have to change the world, and you are.
I'm an only child, and I'm a product of Indian immigrant parents. And I think when you grow up and your parents are telling you on a daily basis that they've sacrificed their lives for you, it does something to you.
Oh my
But
gosh.
I think I don't know, I just loved, I remember watching movies like Working Girl, if you remember that.
Yes.
And just thinking, oh gosh, that's going to be me. And I've always been ambitious. I've always wanted to do things. I read a lot, maybe because I was an only child, and my mother was quite strict, so I wasn't really allowed to do a lot of things. So I ended up reading a ton, and just I really love to read biographies and autobiographies, and I ended up reading a lot of ones of women who were successful, and it just talked to me. And
Yeah.
I grew up in California, in Southern California, in kind of Irvine, which is a wonderful town, but I always felt also I wanted to see more of the world. I wanted to be in cities. I just had a calling for all of that, I think, from an early age. And reading helped because it opened my sense of adventure and awe. So it's just been a part of me, I think. And, initially it was all just, I want to have a big corner office in New York, right? That was my goal growing up.
Yeah. Yeah. And clearly it's evolved. Although you also kind of have the corner office, maybe just not in New York. Thank goodness.
Right.
Yeah. And then I also heard that you're a fan of or were of Coco Chanel. I often think part of the motivation behind this podcast is there's a lack, I think, of authentic, full stories to look up to and say, this is what's possible. I feel like I grew up and spent a lot of time in high achieving environments. Rarely could I look up and say, I actually want to be her. I want that person's life. Usually
right.
I look up and be like, oh, that doesn't seem good. So did you look up to anyone when you were especially maybe as an only child? Who did you look up to?
What's so fascinating is, yes, initially it was Coco Chanel, and it was mainly because she was, at that time, the most successful female entrepreneur. And I love that she came from nothing. I love that she started just making hats. She was an orphan. She started making hats, and she loved to work. And she grew up in a time in Paris where wealthy people just didn't work, and she hated that. And all of those things resonated. It also resonated that she had this fabulous life, and she was meeting artists and painters. And, as a child, I just thought that is everything.
Yeah.
As I grew up, though, there was a lot missing to her story. For one, she never had children. And, after having children, it's really hard for me to relate, honestly, to people that don't, because the complexities change and you change. And so I have always been searching for women who have children who are successful. Those are the people I want to learn from. And, someone's book that I've read, Tammy Duckworth, that's someone I really look up to, who was a U.S. senator, also came from very simple means, lost both her legs in the Iraq War. And I just, how she went from that and then still had children and still manages, and the things that she's done, right? Going on the Senate floor when she had just had a child, the first woman to just strap her baby onto her and walk into the floor. And I think that's what I want more of. And those are the women that I turn to now. And I don't know her. She's a mentor to me without actually ever really mentoring me, but her stories inspired me.
Yeah, she's remarkable. What a great example. I totally agree. So your various forms of ambition brought you through college, USC, and then you followed that dream of the corner office in New York and worked in finance a little bit. Was it fulfilling? What did we think?
And it was sad. It was sad because that had been my dream to become in college. I wanted to become an investment banker. I was so excited. But when I got there, I learned a lot. So I think it was a great place to start my career. But I found I needed more meaning. I found moving money from place to place was not fulfilling for me. And that's where I realized I like to build. I'm a builder. I want to build things. And so it was a great experience to learn what I didn't like, which is also a big part of one's career, right?
Yes. I was looking over your resume in general. It's funny. It seemed like there was always this bent, other than this first stint in finance, which of course is meaningful, has a place, of course. but that you were very interested in sort of an altruistic giving back, meaning helping society kind of thing. Did that come from somewhere, or does it surprise you that was true?
It surprises me because I didn't grow up with a lot of money. So you would think that all I would have wanted to do was make money. We had a lot of financial difficulties growing up, and I had done well in finance. I could have followed that path, but I just was not happy inside. And I ended up reading a book about a woman normal woman, had read an article about a young girl who had been tortured in Turkey. She had actually had a pole stuck up her vagina as a form of torture in a prison. And she said, I need to help people like this. And so she ended up moving to Eastern Europe and doing all of this work, and was a big part of the fall of the Berlin Wall. And I read that story and I thought, that is the kind of life I want to lead. That's the kind of person I want to be. And so I quit my job, and then I moved to India and started working at a nonprofit. And my parents thought that was nuts. And I paid off my college loan, so I didn't have any debt. And I just wanted to, there was just something that told me that I don't know where it came from, to be honest. Yeah. It's been a pull for me.
That's wonderful. Yeah. And so then you moved to India before Eat, Pray, Love even existed.
I know, right?
And worked with NGOs. You founded a company early on. So you have this entrepreneurial instinct.
Yeah. Yeah.
And how did that phase of India life then, I think it transitioned into Harvard Business School?
It did. And so India was eye-opening because it's an incredible place generally. But my first year I worked with a nonprofit, and I lived all over India. I mean, places my parents who are Indian could not have imagined I would have survived in, right? Like villages without water, and really just all kinds of places. And I could have followed that career trajectory and worked in economic development, maybe worked in the UN, whatever. But I learned something really important about myself, is that I like business. I like to build products. I like to do things. And so then I realized, okay, I have to mix the both. Finance was too much on one side. Working in nonprofit and economic development was not, it was too much on the other side. I need to find something in between. And so that's when, and the company I started in India was really a good merriment of that, because it was helping young people get jobs and improve their lives. And so that I think, that's what I realized then. And so taking me to business school, that's the thread I decided I wanted to follow, is work in the business world, but do it in a purposeful way.
Yeah. Yeah. I often wish I'd gone to business school, because I think I have a lot of, I have this instinct and ambition, but I think I wish I had some of these the harder business skills. And we've had some guests previously, I think mostly of Lexi Reese, who's just been a phenomenal figure in all sorts of tech organizations, ran for Congress, a seat in the Senate briefly. And she will say, she's like, one of the best things was that I had a mentor that told me that you have a lot of great instincts and passion, but you got to go learn the business. Do you feel what did you get from the business school environment? Was it something like that, of sort of how to marry your passions with how to practice them?
It really wasn't. I think, to me, the best way to learn business is just to join businesses. I think actually working on the job is how you learn. For me, business school, and especially going to Harvard, it just opened up a whole new set of experiences and a whole new set of people that I would have never been able to meet otherwise. So for me, it was very kind of life opening. For example, I made friends with people from Europe and several people from Eastern Europe. And we went, we did a trip to Cuba. And just being in a communist environment with people who had kind of grown up in communism and learning from them. I went to Bosnia with a friend who had survived the war there. And so I went to my first opera. I've never been to an opera. My family had that wasn't something that we did. So for me, business school was really meeting people from different places in the world who had different upbringings and really opening my mind. I'm sure I learned something at Harvard Business School, right? I'm sure I did learn something about business, but a lot of it it's just learning on the job.
Yeah. Yeah. You wonderfully said kind of just before that was the learnings from India were that you really love building. When did you start to figure out then, and there's another answer to this now, obviously, but to what end you wanted to build? Did you have a why yet? Or were you kind of seeking how I want to use that building instinct for good?
So I When I was in India, I'd started this training company. And so I was building these training modules and doing that work. And then I wrote a book, and that was a real product for me because it was a consumer product in that way. Had I stayed, I might have done something, putting it on a platform or et cetera. So I really like building a product that solves a consumer need that helps them, right? So I'm not interested in building a product that like makes you 10% more efficient or something, but like really building a product that is solving a real deep need that you have to make your life much better.
Yeah.
And making it so it works. And so I like building a product, it works. Customers are happy. They pay you. You can use that money to invest and make that product better. I think that there's something about that cycle I very, very much love. And at the same time, I'm very interested in just honestly economic development and the furthering of the improvement of the human race. So it's kind of combining that. At that time, I had sort of made a decision that the way I can do that is within the education world, within ed tech. And so even after business school, I ended up going to Microsoft and working within the education space there. So for me, that was how I decided like, okay, I could marry all my passions and make a big impact because education is a huge problem.
Yeah, I love this. I also, Schooly, the company that you started, I thought it was interesting because it sort of has a similar, this idea of how can we harvest data that is like under leveraged, underseen, and identify themes, trends, etc. Not different. I mean, it's a similar premise behind citizen health, like in the medical space. There's just so much data that can be used for good. Tell me about getting Schooly off the ground.
Yeah, that was fun. It was, and one of the great things is that, and I this is what I try to tell young people, you don't have to know how to do everything to do it. It's true. You just do it. Learn, And so, what did I know about data analytics, et cetera? I didn't know anything, but I did know that we had a problem in America where public schools were not all offering the same type of courses. So in California, for example, only 30% of public high schools at that time were even offering computer science. And so you can start to see, what a big kind of differentiator that makes to someone who's young and trying to learn. So I knew that just getting that information out there could help create some change, and it could help parents make better decisions, how to lobby their governments, how to, choose what schools they might want to push their kids towards, how to get more charter schools in communities. So that was the idea. And I just sort of started, if that makes sense. I found a data analyst. We went through the process of, okay, how do we get records from schools? It turns out FERPA is a law, and anyone can request records from schools to say, what are the courses you offer? What do you do? And so I just started doing that. We started with a handful of schools. We got the information. My data analyst started to look through that. We started to make sense of that data. I worked with a developer I found and built a consumer, and it was very lightweight in the beginning just to see is there interest? Do people actually like this? And so we launched it in the Bay Area. And I started to see a lot of interest. There were a lot of users that were excited about it. And we were doing things differently and adding value that wasn't already there. I didn't have a business model then. I wasn't, thinking about that at that time. I was just thinking we had gotten some angel investment. How do I make a useful product? And so that's how it started.
Wonderful. And you had some kids at this point? When did kids start coming on the scene?
Yes. Okay, yeah, I did. I had 2 kids at that point.
Wow.
Young kids.
Wow.
Yeah. And so that's right. It was, I started Schooly just before my second child was born.
Wow. A lot of our stories include women. Obviously we interview mothers, but it's on their maternity leaves that they find there's not time. There's a different kind of space and a different sort of empowerment, motivation, incentive. I don't know what it is. There's some catalyst that happens around having children. And then if you're unfortunately lucky to have some maternity leave, you can really take action. Was that sort of in play when you came up with Schooly? Or
I was at, Microsoft for several years working in the ed tech space. And one of my roles was running the global schools program and being able to travel around the world to different schools and seeing what innovation really looked like. So it was actually at that time that I started to formulate, this is something I'd really like to do. And I was missing building my own thing, if that makes sense. And so I started formulating it then. And then, yes, when I went on maternity leave, it gave me some space to think about like, okay, what is the next step going to be now? And so, yeah, you're right. I haven't really put those pieces together, but I'm sure maternity leave gave me some space to think about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And then Amara arrives and that shifts. I mean, you tell me, but I imagine that shifts everything, but maybe walk me through, how that shifted everything.
So I was already underwater at that time with 2 kids, right? Under the age of 4, trying to run this business, raising money. There was a lot going on. My husband was working all the time. We were having all the issues that young couples have. Like, you do the dishes. No, you know, so all of that. And then, Amara came around, and it was unexpected. So birth control is real. People should think about it. And so that was, we hadn't planned to have a third. And so obviously that made things more difficult, but, I was kind of going at that pace. But this, the second Amara started having seizures, everything went to pieces. And so, God, that time was just a blur. So I had to sell my company, Schoolie. Yeah. And then I had to take a break. My family was falling apart, basically, right? My husband was working all the time. I had these 2 other kids that needed a lot of attention, and I didn't know what was happening with Amara. So I took a break at that point, and it was within those 2 years that everything fell apart and then came back together. We got her diagnosis that she had this ultra rare condition. I was trying to, at that point, I wasn't thinking about developing a cure. I was just thinking about how do I keep this child alive, honestly. There was months that she wasn't even moving. She wasn't able to put liquids down her throat without aspirating. It was just a really difficult time. We had to give her this really intense medication for her seizures she was having. So, and I was just trying to learn the system too, the medical system. I had no aspect of this. I had never really dabbled in healthcare. I was never interested in healthcare, biology, any of this stuff. And so just even understanding her disease, understanding what her neurologist was saying to me, and then dealing with my own grief and sadness, just learning that your child has a condition where her intellectual capacity may never exceed that of a 1-year-old, that she may never walk, she may never talk. I talked to an early expert in her condition who told me that she would never walk. And by the way, Amara started walking at 2.5. So just goes to show you to be careful who you listen to, and so I had to go through my own grief and sadness and deal with that as well. And so the first year was just a blur, and I was a wreck, to be honest, and just trying to make it through the day and keep my family together. It was the second year with, about that time that I said, okay, I'm done. I'm done feeling sorry for myself and I've got to do something. And I started to learn a lot more about gene therapy and what is possible. And as an entrepreneur, the second that I know something's possible, it's going to be possible, right? And so that's when I started the Research Foundation, galvanized a group of families. I'm lucky that I have a great co-founder, Nicole Johnson, another mom, lives in New York, has a daughter with FOXP1 syndrome. And we really put this foundation together and started just from the, day one. Okay, what do we need to do with the end in mind that we want a genetic therapy for our children?
Wow. I wonder, having your first 2 kids, having your first child and any children is a dramatic shift. It can rock your sense of identity and sense of self and purpose and make you rethink things. It can be clarifying. I'm wondering if you can reflect on how that went down with your first 2 kids and how that sort of compares to, and are they actually similar things, one far more intense, or are they entirely different experiences?
When I had my first 2 kids, I was complaining all the time. I was like, this is hard. I'm trying to manage my career. My husband's not doing enough. I felt like I was just in a complaining cycle. And after Amara, I realized how ridiculous I had been and how not easy I had it, but how I was not appreciating things, right? And, I should have slowed down a little bit. I should have I didn't really take a maternity leave. I did not take a maternity leave for my second child. And Amara really just slapped me in the face, to be honest, to say like, okay, you have it good. So you figure out how to enjoy this or things are going to get worse, right? And so it was very eye-opening for me. And that's been one of my greatest gifts with Amara, is learning to be in the present. Obviously everyone hears about it, but I was too caught up in a lot of things. And obviously it was very hard. Yes, I never stopped working before, right? And stopping work to be a full-time caregiver while my husband's career was skyrocketing was actually very difficult for me. And I was very resentful. I remember I would go to events with him, with his company, and for the first time, I was just sort of that spouse that no one really wanted to talk to. And it was very hard for me, I have to say. Like, it really, for my identity, which had been so driven on ambitious and building a career, and all of a sudden I was just the caretaker and like a plus one, was really hard for me.
I have chills because that truly, not just being dramatic, but that resonates so deeply with me. And I know it's such a true experience for a lot of our listeners who are deeply ambitious and proud of their accomplishments and achievements, and are also not proud of the fact that they might resent their spouse who's seemingly more successful in a certain season.
Exactly.
I think everyone can remember that moment where they were, the wife of suddenly, or they were like, quote, just a mom, which is a complicated phrase. And I know sometimes I think I saw you wrote something saying, I wish I could just be a mom, actually, sometimes.
Yeah.
But how did you walk me through the therapy? How did we get through? Because there's so much demand on your time. I could completely understand the resentment towards the partner that isn't doing the hands-on work in the same way maybe that you are, although I'm sure doing his best in his circumstances. There's just so much going on. How did we move through that to, you said 2 years, quote, off, which we're far from off, to then saying, let's move into the workplace again in certain ways? And how do we even carve out space for that? How did you pull that off?
It happened in some ways naturally. I started just working on the foundation, and then that's all I was doing. And that took a lot of my time. And so it felt like I was working again. I wasn't getting paid, but I was working, and that felt good. It felt good to take my grief and put it into action and do something about it. And, and now retrospectively, I'm thankful that my husband had a job that allowed me to have the space to do that, right? Because a lot of families don't have the ability to do that. So now I'm thankful for that time. But at the time, I still had a lot of resentment, right? And I mean, that's a deeper, right, where men kind of come in and out. They don't carry the mental load that women carry to think about the family. They just don't. And, that's a whole other topic. So, but I think working on the foundation gave me a lot of purpose and moving things forward. And then when Citizen came into action, and that was also based on a need, as I was going through, oh my God, managing my kid day to day who has a rare disease is a nightmare. And, we need better tools to help families. And also then as a drug developer, we are taking our gene therapy in clinical trials this year. Like, it's monumental. That experience going through and saying, God, it's so hard to get patient data. The way that it's currently happening is not working. I need to do something about it. It just sort of naturally went into, okay, now I want to start another company. The only way to make it all work is to have support, is to get help. And I think so many women don't understand or feel bad about that. There's, in America, we have this DIY culture. It doesn't exist anywhere else in the world, by the way. So I don't know if you've ever been to France to like a normal salon, like a fantastic Sam salon. You get pampered in a way that is unreal. Like, women, they're not unapologetic about being pampered. And here in the United States, we just run ourselves ragged and we feel like we need to do that. So getting help and support is critical, like building that support structure, investing in getting a nanny and getting more help than you think you need. And even if it's really clawing into your salary, it's worth it, because if you don't have that base, you cannot actually get to the next level in your career. You have to create that support structure. So many of us don't have help from our families. We don't have a sister who has no children to jump in and help us, a mother who can help. So we have to create that structure.
Yeah. Yeah. In what you said about starting to work sort of happening organically and how just difficult and intense it is to be home, I've often thought, and many, again, also of our guests think about work. When they work outside of the home, they're actually better parents because they can go off and 100%. Nurture and fill something about them, and then they can come back and be about everybody else. Sounds like that was your experience too.
100%. And I know that, there's family members and others who have said things to me, and I am unapologetic. I like to work. I do. I love to work. I love to create things, and I'm unapologetic. I'm also unapologetic. You know what? I'm going to have a girls' weekend with my best friends, and I'm going to go away, and and you know what? Yeah, maybe I'll miss something that my kids are doing. I am unapologetic now because I truly believe the best thing you could do as a mother is to be happy. If you are happy, your radiance and positivity will permeate through your home. And that is actually the most important thing for children, to have a mother who's not anxious, who's actually filled with joy. Like you can't, there is nothing you could do that is more important than that. So whatever it is you need to do, to me is, I'm just not apologetic anymore about it.
Yes. How did you learn that? Was it
My
a
gosh.
moment? Was it those 2 years? Tell me more.
It was, it wasn't just those 2 years. It is really I mean, I'm in my 40s now, and I think I have a lot more wisdom than in my 30s. I wish I could go back and tell my 30-year-old self this, that, we live in a very patriarchal society, and that makes us feel bad about doing things for ourselves. And we have to stop that. And I looked at, I knew other women who were successful, and I saw what they were doing, and they were surrounded by support, and they took their spa days and they did their things. And I started to learn from that. And first I was a little resentful, like, oh my gosh, you get to do that. But then I was like, I should get to, why am I resentful? That's what I should make my life like. And so it's honestly just been a learning process, and I still go through my ups and downs, obviously, but I am much more defined about my boundaries. And even with my husband, right? Like there's times I'm like, okay, and he's like, well, you just had a massage last week. And I'm like, yeah, I don't care. I don't care. And I just don't, instead of getting angry and fighting with him and getting defensive, I'm like, yeah, sweet. You could do the same. Now, like this is my time. So, yeah, it was a learning process.
Good for you. And then you were taking these organically created jobs. These were big jobs.
So in the beginning, I joined this company, and it was called Citizen also, not to confuse everyone in the world, but it was spelled differently, believe
With
it or
2
not.
eyes.
Yeah. And it was focused on cancer patients. And I joined that company to learn it because they were doing a ton of stuff with data. And I thought, okay, I can learn a lot about how they're acquiring data for healthcare, and I can bring that back to my foundation. And I was also, first I started only part-time with them, because that was kind of my entry back into the work world. I was like, okay, I can do this part-time. I've got my foundation. I still have my children. And I did that for about 6 to 8 months. And then I was ready. Then I was able to build the support structure. We got an au pair at the time. And then I could take that full time. And so actually at Citizen is where I convinced them, hey, you guys should look into rare neurodevelopmental conditions. And I thought of this idea of, taking what they had done, but doing it for the rare disease space. Very shortly after, we were acquired by Invitae. I went to Invitae, and then Invitae went bankrupt, unfortunately. But that whole experience was great because I met this amazing team. And then myself and one of the co-founders of Citizen with 3 Eyes said, let's do let's do it again, but focused only on rare diseases. And let's make it different this time and really make it patient-centric and like really solving the day-to-day problems that patients are having. And so there was born Citizen Health.
Yeah, amazing. And it uses AI for good. I'm like looking for these stories.
It is AI for good because, technology for technology's sake is not, and I think that's been the through line in my career, is that it's utilizing these wonderful technologies, but to actually make a difference. So for example, when we started having e-readers, everyone's super excited. But what is the learning difference? There's no learning difference between flipping a book pages and reading it on a screen. So technology actually has not changed a learning output. So I was really interested when I was at Microsoft of how do we use technologies to actually improve learning. So if you're reading on an e-reader, for example, maybe you can insert things that you couldn't in a physical book, questions in between, etc. That's a very basic example. But how do we start using technology to improve things of human life? And so that's what we're doing with Citizen.
Yeah. Wow. I also wanted to ask if it's okay, and I would ask your husband this if he was here.
Yeah.
But obviously, Amara gets all sorts of deserved attention and is the focus really of a lot of your work.
Yes.
You have 2 other amazing kids too. I struggle. I have 3 kids.
Yep.
Just they are currently, quote, typical, sort of, some slightly less so. But I struggle also to make sure that they all feel like they're equally important, sort of in aggregate. Like, how do you juggle that? I'm sure it doesn't always work.
Oh, it's so hard. And and I always think that actually having a big family, having 3 kids, in our case, 1 child who has issues, is really good for my other 2 kids because they're learning that the attention's not always going to be about them. and they have to step up and be part of a family unit. We're a unit. And when Amara is having a hard time, we all have to help. So, for example, it's really hard for us to change Amara's diapers now. She's 10 years old. She fights back. It sometimes takes 3 people, and my kids help, right? One's holding her legs, one's holding her arms while I'm changing her. We're all in it together. I actually think that's really created a sense of responsibility. That's something I really see missing with kids today, is that we almost over pamper them, and they don't end up with this sense of responsibility of what I have to do. And I think having a big family where you're like, look, it's not all about what I can give you, it's what you can give the family, ends up being really good for all of us. So I do my best to try to do one-on-one time with them. But I think it's also, I know that there's things I can't do. So for example, I can't go to all my kids' soccer games. I just can't do that. But what I can do is then carve out a weekend. And I took my oldest daughter to DC for a weekend, for example, right? And we had this amazing time together. And so I try to do that where she has her one-on-one time with me. Last night it was chick flick night. And so, Soraya, my oldest, and I, watched Emma while putting a face mask on. And I just try to do things like that. But the thing, it's so sad with medical issues. My kids will complain to me about medical issues. And I don't even take it seriously, because I'm like, do you have a rare genetic condition? And my poor daughter had been complaining forever. Like, oh, my ankle's really hurting. It's really hurting. I'm like, you're fine. You're fine. There's no blood coming out of your head. And finally she was really complaining. I'm like, oh gosh, I should probably take her for a checkup. And the poor girl had this like Oshglod Schlatter or whatever it's called because of her soccer, and she needed to do a bunch of stuff. And I felt so bad. I'm like, oh, she's been complaining about this for like a year.
Oh, Oshglod. Yes. That's painful.
Yes, very painful. And she was like, Mom, I told you. And so there's things that get slipped on. But I actually think it's really good to have multiple kids, and, they all work together.
I'm one of 2. My younger sister is 7 years younger than me. So we're sort of 2 only kids-ish. And that was one of the reasons I wanted to have a bigger family. Yeah. Because even though it was harder, very much what you said, I was like, I kind of want the experience where it's not about you, and makes you more resilient, a little more flexible. My husband's the oldest of 6. It's never about him. And I think that chaos is nice, but grass is always greener. Speaking of the chaos, so you're beyond anyone I've spoken to, I would say. You're firing on all cylinders. You're showing up in so many different places for your kids, for kids of parents that you don't even know, through the work that you do with your organization and your company, and, your spouse. And where's Nasha in the middle of all this? Because I think even in a quote typical scenario, you become a parent and suddenly you're mom too, and you're suddenly like employee of. And I've found that like there can be moments where it's like, where have I gone? Not to be so, I don't know, chicken soup for the soul about it.
No, I agree.
But and you mentioned a little bit of like not apologizing for the girls' trip, but I'm curious, you're also changing through all of this too. This is incredibly hard for you. How have you worked through that?
Yeah. And as a woman, you go through, all your hormonal changes, and there's so many things we're all going through. I think for a long time, I didn't focus on myself, and it was very detrimental, and it showed up in how I was at home. It showed up at how I was at work. And I recently got a coach who's helped me a lot in this, that I have to take alone time as importantly as I take my work or being with my family. It's medicine. And it can be going to a spa, but it can also be walking around my garden and staring at a tree, which actually I do quite a bit. And it's very relaxing. But it's so important to remember who you are. One thing, I've mentioned, I love to read. And for many years, I stopped reading because I had no time. And that actually ended up having a pretty bad impact on me. So now I make time on the weekends for 2 hours. I don't care what's going on. I take that time out and I read. And by reading, I mean, I read fiction. I read fun books. I love fiction. And so it did take me some time to learn that. And now I take it really seriously. I go to bed earlier, so I have time in the morning for myself. I never used to do that. I'm a night person. I love staying up late at night, working and, etc. I force myself. I literally force myself. I don't go to as many events anymore. I say no to things that aren't super critical, because I just know that if I don't have time to be with myself, meditate, take a walk, read, whatever, get a manicure, it will start to show up very badly for everyone else.
Yeah. You talk also about a lot of the importance of community and
Yes.
interdependence actually is a wonderful thing versus America is all about independence. How has that, I also imagine like as probably early days, and maybe it shows up in, paper cut ways still. Once you have a child who is not the same as all the other kids, I'm wondering how that, on some level, maybe that you've found wonderful community that's maybe deeper than any community and connection through working through your work and through being with other families that are dealing with similar things as you are, but also maybe feeling alienated and alone and like not understood. You show up at work and you're showing up at work in a very different state than like and from a very different place than everyone else. Has that been have you dealt with that?
I have dealt with that. And the way I've
Mm.
dealt with that is instead of looking at it that, oh gosh, that's so sad for me, I look at it as an opportunity to educate others. So yes, community has always been really important to me. Wherever I have been in my life, I've always created a community. And, the thing is, if you want to have good friends, you have to be a good friend. And so I have always prided myself on being a very good, loyal friend. And so I've always had really good, loyal friends. Where I've lived in different parts of the world, I've gone through completely different things. So here, when we moved to the Bay Area, my husband and I moved from Seattle. I didn't really know a lot of people, but I knew a few people. I had, one or two friends from high school, and I had a friend here, and we were all having kids around the same time. And so we built that community.
Mhm.
And then when Amara happened, this community was there for me like nothing else, right? They took my other kids when I couldn't watch them. They were there for me when I was crying. Like they were there for me. And there's some friends that weren't there for me because they were going through their own things, and that's okay too. But I think community is everything. And I mean, and I do spend I actually did this, I went through this exercise where I put like the amount of time I spend on different things. And I spend a lot of time with my friends because I I need friendships, and then having kids is great because, you can have people come over with their kids, and I would end up just meeting moms at the park with our kids, and, we're drinking a bottle of wine while our kids are doing God knows what. But you need to find like-minded mothers, especially that are going through the same things you are going through. And then, yeah, when Amara, it's awkward taking her places. Like she pulls things down and she makes funny noises and she does all that. And for a while I was like, oh gosh, like, can I take her places? But then I looked at it, actually, I'm doing a great service to my friends and to their kids, because this is a lot of families that have kids like this end up staying at home and not meeting anyone. And so you don't see these kids. You don't see kids in wheelchairs. You don't have any, there's so many kids in wheelchairs. Their families don't want to take them out of their homes. So I look at it as an opportunity, and I say this to my friends and their kids, like, you're so lucky you get to know Amara and you get to know what kids like this are going through, and think about that. And so many of my friends' kids have done fundraisers for her. They love her. And so I think I've like really opened the eyes of my community. And then, of course, I've built this incredible rare disease community where I have parents who have kids with rare diseases, and we're like soul brothers and sisters to each other because we're going through something that's so devastating at the same time. But yes, for me, I would find that life had very little purpose if I did not have the close friendships that I do.
Good for you. I was curious in the community that you described. I was going to ask a salty question about this, but maybe it's not all about gender. I often notice when really hard things happen to families, it's typically the mother who turns it into a crusade and like takes it upon them to like change the world so their kid can be okay. I don't know if that has to be true, but is that what you see? And what do you make of that if it is true?
So, interestingly, in the rare disease space, yes, there's a lot of moms. There are also some incredible dads. John Crowley, good example. My good friend Mike Graglia. Like, there's some great dads also doing it, but there are more moms. I think it's good, because one of the things with rare disease leadership, I think women are great leaders. We have the power and the energy, but we also we're intuitive and we have compassion. And I think in a world, I just think this male-dominated top-down leadership model is getting played out. And so I like in the rare disease space that we're almost breaking new frontiers of what could leadership be like? What is leadership through collaboration? What is leadership when, you support one another versus telling people what to do? So I think it's really exciting. Yes. And there are more moms that take on the crusade, but there are some dads as well. There are some dads. It's funny, my husband and I now swap where he takes off from work versus me, like we take breaks. And when he took his last break, he, joined the PTA, and he's like, there are all these moms, and he would not get invited to like the mom's breakfast, the mom's lunch. He's like, hey, I would love to get invited. So I think we as women also probably need to do some work on like letting men in a little bit on our birthday.
So true. So true. No, it is true. I do think it's funny. Dudes get a bad rap in this context. And I think they're suffering too. Like, I think we're all kind of suffering under a similar regime, but for different reasons. So I was wondering if there are things about your lived experience as a mother, as a founder, chief business officer, CEO, all these big things that you carry that you're like, I wish people just knew.
Yeah.
Is there anything for you? Probably
it's
a lot
very hard.
of things.
I mean, it is, to what you said, like you show up to work and people don't realize that the night before your child had 6 seizures and you didn't sleep.
Yeah.
That, your child has been screaming for 10 hours straight and you do not know why, because they can't speak to you. You don't know if their head's hurting, your stomach's hurting. You don't know what is wrong. I think when families have any child or a spouse or anyone that's going through a medical crisis, and by the way, we all will have that within our lives, it is, the pain and the physical, emotional toll is so difficult. I do wish there was more understanding of that. I luckily, have a co-founder in my company at Citizen who does understand that. And we have a culture of understanding that. And so I've recently taken a sabbatical. I took a 2-month sabbatical because Amara was having so many medical issues. I just could not bear it. I could not deal. So I needed that time to get things under control and to get my own emotions under control. I had a company that supported that. Not every company is like that. I wish more companies were like that. I wish we looked at, people as a whole, not just what they're bringing to the workplace, but what they're going through after. I think you'll have a much more productive workforce that will be loyal to you if you care about their whole 360 lives. So I wish we had more of that.
Yeah. What do you think little Nasha, who's, only child, ambitious, really determined to find success, be successful, have the corner office, looking up to Coco Chanel. What would she think about you today? What would she want to say to you? Or what would she think of what you've made of your life?
That's such a lovely question. I think she'd be proud of me.
Yeah. Because?
Yeah. I think she'd be proud of me that I stayed true to my ambition, but I took hardship and I turned that into something. I actually took my ambition and I took that hardship and did something with that. I didn't let go of my ambition just because I had something hard that happened to me. I actually blended them together. When I introduce myself, when I'm on a business call, a conference, whatever, I don't hide behind the fact that I'm a mother. I make it front and forward. I say, the most important thing about me is I'm a mom of 3 and my youngest has a rare disease. I also run a business. I also run a foundation. And I think just owning it, we got to own it as women. We are who we are. And it's amazing that we can do everything we're doing. We have the capacity to do everything. So that's what I think she would think.
Yeah, I think she'd be impressed and proud for sure. And also that you've talked a little bit about purpose and I'm a purpose seeker, meaning person. And I think we, as humans, crave purpose. And I think it's what allows us to do the hardest things.
Yes.
Once we've found the purpose, the doing of the hard is not as hard. And that's been true for a lot of these stories. I feel like you found that. Do you feel like you found a purpose that wasn't as certain, like that you never would have found had this experience not happened? Yeah.
Yes. And what you said is so important. I think that leads to a lot of depression in the workplace for people where they don't feel their work is purposeful. I think finding purposeful work is everything. It's as important as community. You work all day, right? Like what you do is so important. For me, my purpose has been slapped in my face. It's in my face every day. I see my child who's not doing well every day. That gives me purpose daily. I think if all of us looked at what we're going through, we can find real purpose and then use our skill set to do something about it. I think purpose is when I talk to people that aren't feeling well about their lives, it's so clear they lack purpose.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I want to be respectful of your time, and we love doing these little wrap-up questions. There's one, this is all related to thinking back in time, and I might ask it twice given your circumstances, but one being going back to your new mom self.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you would say to her?
Yes, I would say calm the hell down. I would say, the anxiety, pick gratitude over anxiety. Gratitude is the one thing that can help rewire our brains. And I've tried it and it actually works. So every time, we as new moms, we try to control so much and we're so worried about what the future is going to be. Flip it with gratitude. Just flip it with gratitude with what you're going through. If you have to take time off work, you know what? Life is really long. It's okay. It's okay to take a year off if you need it. It's okay to take 2 years off if you need it. You are going to be okay. And by the way, you can get some brownie points for your husband. So you could say later on, you take 2 years off now. I did that, right? So that's what I would tell my young mom self.
So the second version was asking new mom to Amara. What would you say to her?
I would actually say something really similar. I was so anxious for the first few years.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I wish I could tell that mom it's all going to work out. In 10 years, you're going to dose your first patient with this gene therapy. Just calm down and just enjoy the process. I wish I could have said that to her.
Yeah. Well, so Amara recently turned 10 and you had promised that we would have this clinical trial in that time span, and you did.
We did.
Hell, that's incredible.
Yeah.
And also to your credit, no one, to your point of going back and wishing I'd tell her that it would all work out. Was anyone telling you it would be okay?
No. No, because no one knew the future, right? No one knew what a hard road it was. And the other thing I would say is you're not alone. We often think as moms, we're so alone. God, we're all swimming in the same sea. We're all here supporting each other. The ground is supporting you. The reason I have this gene therapy today is not because of me. It's because of the team. It's because of all of us that have been working together. And it took me a while to realize that, God, all these people are here for me, as I am there. I always thought that I have to be here for everyone, but actually everyone was here for me. I would really wish I had understood that.
I love that. A lot of us have trouble accepting help or knowing what to ask for or knowing how it could look. I totally identify with that. Related, actually, next question is about things or themes of things that could have made motherhood so far, as you've experienced it, easier. Imagine there are a lot of details, but is there some sort of aggregate theme that comes to mind?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think the mental load of being a mother in general is so hard, but having a child with a rare disease or a devastating condition is so incredible. I mean, I'm not trying to plug my company, but I wish to God I had the Citizen app today. I mean, I wish I'd had it 10 years ago. It would have saved me so much time. It would have saved me so much heartache of trying. I mean, I can't explain to you what it's like to go to a doctor who has never seen another patient like your daughter and trying to understand. So and that's why I'm so passionate about what we're building. I wish I had that tool day one.
Yeah. And for folks listening, can you give a little overview? Because folks there might be listeners who could benefit from it too. What does the app offer?
Yeah. So it's Citizen Health. Yeah, go ahead. It's offered on the iPhone right now. We're coming out with a version that will be offered on all platforms and actually will be text-based, which is a lot of moms prefer that. And what it does is it gets all your child's medical information in one place. You can track all your child's symptoms by just talking to your phone. It will tell you what the best next step is that you should do. It will bring things out that you have not thought about. It will connect you to families that are very similar to your family who can help you and assist you. The goal is to make you feel not alone and to help you really just take that next best step for your child.
Amazing. Related, actually, I was wondering if there's anything specifically that we could do. How could we help you or Amara or the organization FoxG1 Research? What would be most useful for people that are listening to do?
So, I tell this to everyone that rare diseases are completely underfunded by pharma and by the government. So pick a rare disease that you are passionate about and make it a part of your giving portfolio. For us, for FoxG1, we have a $6 million gap to finalize our clinical trial. We are fundraising like crazy. If anyone is passionate about what we're doing, we're trying to build a roadmap, a new way to cure rare diseases. please, like it's foxg1research.org. You can go and learn more. That is like the number one thing we need. And that is what every rare disease organization needs. We are so underfunded. You cannot do any of this work without money. And what's amazing about Rare is that it's parent and patient entrepreneurs that are really developing cures. It's unlike anything else I've ever experienced, to be honest. So that's really the main thing. And then if anyone uses Citizen, I would love your feedback. It's nasha@citizen.com. Just, let me know what you think. I want to hear from everyone. My goal is really to make this work for moms.
Yeah. Well, we'll include all the details in our episode description so it can be an easy click for everybody. Our last question, shifting gears from business a little bit to these wonderful 3 kids, all 3 of them, I'm sure chaotic in their own ways. Yeah. They might listen to this one day. Is there anything you'd want to say to them?
Yes, I would say to them that everything I have done is not for them, but it's because of them. And I hope that they see what I've done, and in their careers, they also think about not just money, but how are they going to help humanity. And I would also say to them that the thing I value the most is our humor as a family. We're so funny. And the pranks we do and the adventures we have. And like, that is what life is about. And so that's what I hope they would hear.
Oh, I love this. That's wonderful. I completely agree. I think humor solves everything.
Everything,
I think it's the most important skill. Yeah. And it just brings everyone back to what matters and a joy. It's a great reset. So hang on to that. That's wonderful. Well, Nasha, it was you're remarkable. It was wonderful to hear your story and all the work that you're doing. And you're an incredible mother, an incredible leader, an incredible human in this world. Little Nasha would absolutely be incredibly proud of you. So thank you for sharing your story with us. And inspiring so many people to live their version of it. So it really is going to make a difference. So thank you.
Thank you.
Well, Nasha, you rock. I don't know how you do what you do and have such humor about it. And also are so open about how it actually is impossible sometimes. But you soldier on anyway, and it's really remarkable. After we stopped recording, of course, we got into some juicy things that I will share briefly here. I was complimenting her on how she's so wonderfully unapologetic about taking time for herself, and creating, we now call them boundaries, but basically saying like, I need certain things, and during certain times I need to be doing other things, and having control over your life, especially when life is so out of your control. And we were talking about how women in general, and certainly mothers, are kind of conditioned to be sorry and conditioned to apologize, conditioned to feel guilty. And this whole model of thinking that self-sacrifice is like a measure of how much we love our kids. It is not. I think that is a way of sacrificing ourselves and taking ourselves away, and undermining ourselves. We deserve to not be sacrificed. And I also love how she was like, my kids also need to step into and take on their own roles within a family. All sorts of hard things are happening. We all have responsibility for helping to make them better. So she's a wonderful role model in that way. We also talked about sometimes that behavior is kind of modeled by our own mothers, which I'm sure is a generational thing. She and I are similar ages, so our parents are of similar ages. And there's a little bit of like that traditional model. And I think, I don't know, we could have a whole other episode about where that comes from. But I'm hopeful that we're in a new generation and modeling a new way. The other thing, just to recap from what we heard, which was a wonderful conversation, highlighting how she emphasized getting help and setting up systems that make your life work. We hear this a lot, but I think what I really liked in her nugget was invest in more help than you think you need. Generally, this goes back to this idea of self-sacrifice. Don't just do enough to get by. Do a little bit more. Don't just have childcare during the wee out, like squeezing it in just around your work day. Like maybe standardize a date night periodically, or a morning or a weekend. I recognize not all of us have the resources to do that, but if and when we do, go for it. And then, as she said,